spoiler alert, recording an album is not cheap. Understatement! Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Sam and I am a full-time independent musician. Today I wanted to give you a little insight into the wallet of a full-time musician, because we all know that music isn't a real job, right? Well, I thought I'd be open with you guys and give you a little overview of how I earn my money as a full-time, self-employed independent musician, including my different revenue streams, where the majority of my expenses lie, and what my finances have looked like over the past 5 years. Spoiler alert, COVID had a little bit of an impact. Understatement! Why? Firstly, I don't think we talk about finances as openly as we should. Secondly, there are still so many people out there that don't think of music as a real career, or that it is sustainable enough to consider as a full-time job. Maybe some of you who are watching this are interested in making a full-time career out of music, and you're just wondering how. This video is solely about my personal financial situation. This isn't representative of every musician. We all play different roles in the industry and earn an income in a variety of different ways. And for me, every year is different, but this particular video will focus on my income and expenses of 2022. So let's get started with my income streams. I've always been a performance-heavy musician. As you can see, 85% of my annual income for 2022 came from performing. I earn the majority of my income through gigs and playing live, whether that be support slots, festivals, gig venues, weddings, you name it. This has always been the case for me. But as of 2022, I realised after having 2 years of all of my gigs being cancelled because of COVID lockdowns, that maybe it's important that I branch out and expand my income streams so that all of my eggs weren't just in one basket. So, at the start of the year, I decided to set up a new membership scheme, similar to Patreon, where my followers could join me and support me on a monthly basis and receive various rewards in return. This was my first year hosting a membership scheme. So as an income stream, it's not quite as established yet as my performance schedule income, but I've actually been really surprised by the level of support I've had from it. For the full year, 5% of my annual income came from my members. I then had 2% fall under other. Other encompasses everything from recording work, so being a backing vocalist or being commissioned to record a song for someone. It also covers licensing if someone wants to use my music publicly. And particularly for this year, my crowdfunder was still live at the start of this year for my debut album collection. So I had a lot of support from my followers in terms of crowdfunding donations. 1.5% of my annual income came from product sales. This is a lot less than in previous years, and that's mostly because I haven't been on tour this year, and with tours you usually have new CDs and new merchandise, and since I've been working on my debut album this year, I haven't really been promoting any of my older music either. Finally, 0.5% of my annual income came from royalties. Now, disclaimer, the royalties shown here on my 2022 breakdown doesn't factor in streaming royalties, and that's because I usually leave them in my distributor account to build up over time, mostly because it takes a long time to build up streaming royalties to a substantial amount, because streaming royalties aren't great. So in 2022, I didn't withdraw any. These royalties that you see here are solely performance royalties from when I've played live. In the UK, this comes from PRS, which is the Performing Rights Society. So all establishments in the UK, not just gig venues, but also hairdressers, doctors' surgeries, anywhere that plays music, whether it's a radio station, CD player, or live music, has to have a music license. A percentage of the money that these establishments pay for their license goes towards the musicians behind the music that you're listening to. So if one of my original songs is played, I earn royalties from that. Similarly to my product sales for this year, this figure would probably usually be higher, but again, because I've been working on my debut album and not pushing much new music, and I've not been on tour performing my original stuff, my overall royalties this year are actually quite low. Now I'm going to continue with my income for just a little bit longer because I wanted to show you a 5-year overview so you can see how different things impact my income as a musician. In 2018 and 2019, I performed UK tours, and then in 2020, COVID hit and the lockdowns and regulations continued through to 2021. So 2022 has been my first normal year as a full-time musician. As you can see, my income more than halved during the pandemic of 2020. I faced a 58% income loss in that year alone, although the actual raw percentage is a lot higher than that, because this 58% income loss still factors in the government business support that I received. So if we're looking at actual income earned from my job during that whole year without that support, you can see very clearly from this diagram, without that support, my income was practically non-existent for the whole year. I mean, even with the government support, my total income is still extremely low in comparison. But had I not received any support, I'd have been in a very difficult position. I still had rent to pay, bills to pay, and the government grants didn't exactly provide enough for luxury, leisurely living. But thankfully, 2022 bounced right back, and all the festivals and weddings and gig venues opened straight back up again, and more than made up for my COVID years. Next up, let's talk expenses, because it's kind of expensive being a full-time musician. I am an unsigned independent artist, so I keep every penny I earn, which is amazing, but it also means that everything I pay out comes out of my own pocket, not a fancy record label's or a big management team's, mine. And for me, there's usually quite a lot to pay out, so let's break it down briefly. In 2022, 0.8% went on my members. This included things like gift hampers, I treat my higher tier members to birthday meals, etc. 10.1% was spent on transport. The majority of this was on fuel, travelling from gig to gig. Other costs include toll roads, public transport, that kind of thing. 3.5% was spent on business food and drink. I gig hundreds of times a year, so I end up buying hundreds of drinks and snacks and meals when I am out of the house. 3% on my website hosting platform, domain name, my emails, blah blah blah. 2.4% on marketing. Again, I've not had much marketing to do this year because I've not released much new music or made any exciting announcements. 7.1% on equipment. This is quite high this year because I invested in a home recording setup so I could record bespoke songs for my members each month and also advertise more recording services for commissions and remote session work. 0.6% distribution. This was the cost of uploading my singles to Spotify, Apple Music. I spent 33% of my annual expenditure of 2022 in the studio. I'm recording my debut album, and recording an album is not cheap. You've got studio hire costs, costs or venue hire costs. For example, we recorded the strings in a church. You've got the studio engineer, producer, masterer, everything. 6.7% went on other musicians, mostly who played on the album. 0.7% merchandise. This was quite low this year because I haven't needed any new merchandise, but I did order some samples for new merchandise ideas for the new album. 1.6% on stagewear. And I use stagewear loosely because this also factored in the many outfits I wore for various photo shoots. 19.3% on photography and videography. I don't know if this comes as a surprise or as expected, but music videos are very expensive. Take one music video I did in 2022, for example. I had to pay 4 actors, the cameraman, the drone cameraman, I had venue hire, I had to buy all of the props, parking for everyone. It adds up to a lot. 3.1% on software. That one's pretty self-explanatory. This is editing software, file storage software. 2.3% went on professional fees, my public liability insurance, my equipment pat testing, my musicians union annual membership, and more. 2.1% on office equipment. Because yes, whilst I do go out and gig a lot, I also work in my office in the daytimes. And I record a lot of my content here. So a desk and a chair and things like that are important. Finally, I spent 3.5% on technology. This covers things like new camera SD cards, computer repair when my work computer broke, a new interface for connecting my recording equipment to my computer, etc., etc. As I've said, these expenses can change dramatically every year depending on what project I'm working on, if I'm touring, if I'm recording new music. So I could come back to this next year and find that I've spent 50% on marketing and 0% on studio sessions. So whilst this is an interesting insight into my wallet as a full-time musician, it's not necessarily representative of my career as a whole because my years are so varied. But I hope it gives you a better understanding of what it takes to be a full-time independent musician, what my income streams look like and what they depend on, what my expenses cover, and where your money as a supporter goes. Going forward, I want to broaden my income streams more and avoid being so reliant on one single form of income. While that has suited me for many years, I realised the importance of having multiple income streams once lockdown had hit. And I learned the importance of having income sources that were more in my control. And I'm now definitely starting to pick out ways of encouraging that more. 2022 was my best financial year to date, despite not making much new music or going on tour or having any new products to sell. I opened the doors to start earning more revenue digitally by creating more online content. I started a new podcast, I started a new membership scheme, I started creating more video content on my social media platforms. And while some of those things required a big initial investment, like my home recording setup, that does now unlock many more avenues for me, as I can now commission my work for more services. I can record more content from home without having to hire places, equipment, people. So we're heading in the right direction, I think. For any aspiring musicians out there who are perhaps interested in how to pursue music as a full-time career, I hope you found some value in this video, whether it's the best ways of bringing in an income for the first time, or things you might want to consider investing in to get you started. I don't know. Hopefully it's helpful. But thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all of your support. You guys are the reason that I'm able to make it as a full-time musician, and I cannot tell you how grateful I am for such an amazing opportunity. If you guys have any questions about my life as a full-time musician, or you'd like to see me touch on a particular aspect of the job, then pop me a comment below and I'll see what I can do. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you soon. Bye!